You thirsty? Was that good? You good? Yummy, yummy? Alrighty, so I have the dough with the top crust on it that has been in the refrigerator for half an hour. And I'm going to roll it out, do the same process as last time. Roll it out, cut it, fill it, bake, just kidding. Put it in the refrigerator for about 20 minutes, then bake, then eat. Oh my God, okay, so we're just gonna lightly flour the top. Okay, it's pretty much already rolled out, which is nice. I don't have to do too much more. That was a good idea on my part in the last video to kind of roll it out into a rectangle already, so I don't have to work it too much. I'm gonna try to work a little bit faster this time because, as you saw with my other dough, there's a lot in the way here. As you saw with my other dough, it was getting a little warm, it was sticking. I'm gonna add a little bit more flour to the bottom. There we go. So I'm just gonna try to bust this out. You can feel free to talk amongst yourselves while this process happens. So it's looking pretty good. Feels really nice, actually. It looks good. High hopes for this one. Okay, so I think I'm gonna make 8 squares from this dough. There are a few air pockets. I'm just gonna leave them because it seems pretty encased and I don't wanna ruin that. So I'm gonna make 8, I said. Maybe I wanna roll this a little longer. It's a little bit thicker than 1/8 of an inch. Yeah, I can roll it a little bit longer. Doesn't seem to be sticking as much as the other one, which is nice. I'm going to cut this into 8 pieces now and then fill them. They're not going to be square at all, but we'll deal. I mean, technically they're square because they're rectangles. So I'm going to move them around. Just get a little bit of flour underneath them. They already seem much more put together than my last ones, but I was working pretty slowly because I was getting distracted by myself. Okay, so yeah, they're kind of rectangles, but we're still going to do the same shapes as before. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just cut them all into the shapes that I want them to be, and then I'll fill them all. So let's go with this guy first. So, has everyone baked anything fun during quarantine? I know that we were all going through a sourdough phase at the beginning and then it turned into banana bread. But yeah, let me know what you've been baking. And it appears that the comment section has moved from below. Is it still below? I swear I watch YouTube. Anyway, it's moved, so wherever it's moved to, leave a comment wherever it is, and tell me what you've been baking during quarantine. Okay, so now let's make these all into, this one's gonna be a little funny, but we're gonna make do. That's fine. As long as there's like a little window to put stuff, then it's okay. You know, it doesn't need to be perfect. Sure. Like a little pastry window. Just make it go as far as it goes. Okay, so here's this one, it's off screen, but anyway, here they are. And now we're just gonna fill them. Okay, so I filled all of these. This one has honey in it and the honey's already spilled out, so I can tell that's probably a bad idea. But I did have 2 extras that I didn't know what to do for the filling because I only cut them for 6 for some reason. Anywho, I'm gonna transfer them back to the baking sheet lined with parchment, and then I'm gonna stick them in the fridge. And then leave them in there for the 20 minutes, 20-25 minutes that it's gonna take the other batch to bake. So the timer did go off for those ones. Oh yeah, the honey's totally leaked out of that one. The timer did go off for those ones, so I will be baking those shortly. Not sure if the pinwheels were a good idea for the liquidy ones, but it's a learning experience, right? Okay, so here's what they look like. I'm gonna stick these in the fridge and then we'll be back. Okay, so here is the first batch that we rolled out. This one is without the top crust. It's been in the refrigerator for 20 minutes and it's pretty firm, which is something that you want when you bake any kind of pastry like puff pastry or tart shells, pie shells, things like that. So I'm gonna egg wash it before I put it into the oven. So I just have an egg wash here. And this egg wash is actually leftover egg whites that got some egg yolk in them that I was gonna use to make macarons, but because it had egg yolk, I couldn't use them. So now I have egg wash for days. I'm probably gonna make scones or something and use the rest. Okay, so these are egg washed, and now I will bake these for 20 to 25 minutes. Let's double check. Attention span of a flea. Wash them before they go into the oven. Bake them for 20 to 25 minutes or until the tops are golden brown. Yeah, okay, so let's bake for 20 to 25 minutes and we'll see you then. Okay, Pims, it's been about 10 minutes since I put these ones with the top crust in the refrigerator when I realized that I probably don't even need to put them in the fridge again before I bake them because they have the top crust, which should prevent the butter from leaking. That said, I am gonna take 4 of these pastries and put them back in the fridge, and the other 4 I'm just gonna leave out for the remainder of the bake time. That's on the oven for the pastries without the top crust. And that way I can see if it matters if I have to refrigerate this one or not. So I'm gonna separate them out, put half back in the fridge, and then leave the rest out until they're ready to be baked. I was just gonna like cut it down the center, but I think instead I'm just gonna get a new piece of parchment and then we'll go from there. Okie dokie. So I will take one of the honey ones over to the new sheet because, I mean, like the honey's just all over the place, so I feel like that's fair. I'm gonna do the pinwheel here. This one has apple, that one has, okay. So we'll do this one. And I feel like I need like another wet one on this side. That's weird to say. This is apple and honey. I can just cut another apple. I can just stick apple on that one. Okay, I'll do that. These ones are basically the same. Those are here. So it's basically like the honey one and the cheese one. So I'll do the cheese one here since I don't really want to move that one over. And yeah, so I'm gonna go with this one stays in the fridge just because I have more wet ingredients on here. And this honey is just a disaster. So I'm just gonna put this back in the fridge and then I'm gonna leave these out at room temperature. Probably for the duration of however long is left on the pastries that are already in the oven, and then however long it takes to bake these. Okay, I had some leftover apples cut, so I think I'm just gonna add apples to this one since it's honey and apple, and it'll be more similar to the one that's on the other tray. And then we'll leave these out at room temp. I just checked on the puff pastry that's in the oven and they needed 5 more minutes. So we'll be back. All right, so the ones without the outer crust have fully baked. It took 25 minutes and here they are. I think they look really good. I'm so surprised the butter didn't leak out, and I think that's because I ended up refrigerating them for about 20 minutes before I baked them, so that is definitely a game changer. They puffed up really well. I really want to touch one to show you, but it's really hot. So I'm gonna let it cool for just a little bit, and then we can check it out together. So this is the puff pastry with the outer crust on it. It's been in the fridge for about 25 minutes and I'm going to bake it now. In the meantime, I think we can probably bust one of these open. The pan is still quite warm, but I can touch these now, so it should be okay. This one looks so good. It's like it's got a little bit of like browning, caramelization. Some might say burnt, but that's just like your opinion, man. I'm gonna go with this one here because it's right up front. Ooh, buddy, this is still very hot. Okay. Hot. There's that. So there's definite layers here, which is awesome. I mean, I totally just want to eat this, but yeah, here. There's definitely good layers. It is a bit greasy, as you can see here. It kind of reminds me of when I tried to make croissants at home, where the inside wasn't completely dry. It was just kind of greasy, and I think that's because the butter got too incorporated with the flour, but there's definitely defined layers, which is nice. The outer part is definitely crispy, and the flavor is really good. So I'm gonna stop eating this right now because we still have the other 2 batches remaining. I'm gonna let those bake off, and then we'll come back and see how they did. Here is the one with the crust, and not bad. I 100% forgot to egg wash them, but they turned into a light golden brown. The honey one is a disaster, but I'm just gonna kind of slide it over so that it doesn't harden in its own like burnt honey goo. But otherwise, yeah, no butter spillage here. Looks like the honey spilled out of this one. Otherwise, everything is pretty much intact. 25 minutes is definitely the bake time for these. I checked it at 25 and the tops weren't golden brown, and now they are. So the last one to go is this one, this tray, and this tray has been sitting out at room temperature for the duration of this one's bake time, so around roughly 25 minutes, at most 30 minutes. So I will egg wash these and then I will stick them in the oven for 25 minutes and see how they turn out. Oh, and these ones are the batch with the, what did I end up calling it? The outer crust. And just a reminder, this is the batch with the outer crust on it that have been sitting out at room temperature. Something that I noticed from the other batch is that they were much too hot to handle and open to show you how flaky they were, what the inside looks like. So I'm gonna wait on these ones a few minutes and then I'm gonna come back and open up this cheese pinwheel to see what it looks like inside. Okay, so I ended up getting kind of distracted and I made noodles with the extra top. What am I calling this now? Overcoat. With the extra crust dough. So I made noodles out of that. And so these are pretty much completely cool. They're a little bit warm, but not as hot. So let's break this open. There's definitely a crunch more than a crispiness to this one. And it's kind of like a wonton skin. But yeah, here. So we still have some layers. It's not as greasy actually, interestingly enough. I wonder if that's just because I let it cool completely on the baking sheet before breaking it open. So after taking a bite, the texture is kind of fun. So this top part is really, really crispy and crunchy. And then the middle it's not as greasy as the last one. It's definitely flaky. Having this extra crust kind of gave a level of crispiness that was actually pretty nice. This is the pastry that was in the fridge for 20 minutes. And it looks like it turned out pretty well. I mean, got a lot of layers. It's not terribly greasy. It's definitely not as greasy as the last batch. So the last batch has about 5 more minutes on it. We're gonna take it out and we're gonna see how those went. I'm gonna eat this. All right, and here is the last batch. Now this one is the pastry that had the crust on the top. What did I call that? I can't. Oh my God. Outer crust. I called it an outer crust. So these are the pastries that have an outer crust that were left out at room temperature for about 25 to 30 minutes before I baked them. So even though they came down to room temperature and it is pretty warm in here, there isn't all that much butter leakage. From my first video, I compared when I didn't use the outer crust to when I did, and there was a lot less butter leakage happening. For this one, it seemed that my outer crust worked well as the one without it. So I think the big difference here is that I refrigerated the dough without the outer crust, and the one with outer crust, it looks like it didn't need to, like it could go either way. So this one was not refrigerated for 25 minutes to half an hour, and it seems fine. So I'm gonna let these cool on the tray again. Oddly though, this one doesn't look like it had as much puff, so it makes me wonder if it's gonna be greasier inside because maybe the butter melted, which didn't let off enough steam to make it puff. So we're gonna see how that went. I did end up egg washing these, but you can't really tell. They look just like the other ones. But yeah, we're gonna let this cool, and then we're gonna open up this cheese pinwheel and see how it turned out. Okay, it's been about 10 minutes. The pan is completely cool. Let's see how this one goes. I'll move it up so the crumbs don't fall down. And here we go. Oh, that was a very satisfying crunch. And again, it's not as greasy as the first batch. So I probably should have let the first batch rest or cool on the pan completely before I broke into it. But yeah, we got some layers in here. So it is a little flatter because it is in a pocket of crust, so it didn't puff up as much, but there are separate layers, like kind of an accordion here. That actually looks really nice, kind of like a croissant. And again, it's not terribly greasy. It does have that telltale crunch of having an outer crust, but overall, pretty good. I think I prefer it without the outer crust, but if this was for butter prevention, then I suppose I could say that it did its job. But I think what really ended up happening is that I refrigerated the dough before I baked it, and so it kind of just stayed together better and didn't leak as much. So I lined them all up. This is the puff pastry without the outer crust. This one has the outer crust that was refrigerated for 25 to 30 minutes. And then this one is the one with outer crust that wasn't refrigerated for 20 to 35 minutes. So it stayed out at room temperature. What I noticed is that the one that stayed out at room temperature, when I touch it, like even the bottom, it's really greasy. Like my hands get really greasy. Whereas with the middle one, not terribly greasy, just kind of crummy. And with the last one, there's no grease at all. It's pretty much dry, just crumbs. So here are the three, which I've already showed you. The regular, the outer crust, and the outer crust, but stayed at room temperature. And as opposed to making an outer crust, I think what really changed this puff pastry recipe was the fact that I refrigerated the dough before I put it in the refrigerator. And I think I did that before when I did puff pastry previously, just because it would only make sense, but maybe I didn't put it in for a long enough time. I probably did it for about 10 to 12 minutes. That makes the most sense to me because that's usually how long I put cookies in the refrigerator for before I put them into the oven. So I put them in the fridge for about 20 to 25 minutes before I baked them. And the butter didn't end up leaking out. So I would say that you don't necessarily need to make the outer crust recipe to make my cheap puff pastry recipe, but when you're baking, you definitely have to put it in the refrigerator first before you bake them. So I was really curious to see if I could still make this recipe, and I'm really glad that I tried it out. I did use some more knowledge that I have acquired over the last 3 years since the video was posted, and so I think that definitely helped in doing this recipe over again. For the cheap puff pastry recipe part 1, I used the exact same recipe. I did add a little bit more flour because it is quite humid here, but the recipe still pretty much stays the same. For the outer crust recipe, there was a discrepancy. I'm not quite sure where I got 85 grams of flour. I want to say it's because I just used a scant cup of flour, but when I did it this time, I did end up using more flour, so I will update that recipe back in the description box of that video. This wasn't a tutorial. If you've made it this far, thank you. You know it's not a tutorial, but if you kind of like skipped and done like 10 seconds ahead, because this is a pretty long video, I'm gonna assume, because I shot pretty much the whole day. This isn't a tutorial. My recipes are already out there. I just wanted to see if they still worked or if I can still do them. Also, I was craving pastries, so now I have a whole bunch to eat. So I hope that you do try out my cheap puff pastry recipe. If you do have any questions, you can feel free to leave the comments wherever the comments box has disappeared off to. Okay, I gotta wait until that motorcycle goes by. There's like 5. I'm about to run out of memory on my camera, so make sure you follow me somewhere. Feel free to follow me on my Instagram. I'll leave the link wherever the description box is now. And yeah, that's it. I had a lot of fun making this video. I hope that you enjoyed it. I hope that you enjoyed revisiting an old recipe of mine. Maybe it's something that I might do in the future. I don't know. But anyway, I hope that you have a wonderful day. Bye.